Welcome to Steve Hunter's UTalk. This is Egberto Willies speaking to you today. Steve is unable to work today, but he will return tomorrow. Today, we have a very special guest. Her name is Teneshia Hudspeth. Teneshia is the Harris County Clerk. She will be with us discussing the Houston, the HCAD elections that we're having currently and a few others. So I think if we can go ahead and start out and bring Teneshia in. I believe she has several interviews that she has to get done today, so we have to get started right away. Good morning, Teneshia. How are you doing today?
Good morning. Doing just fine. Thank you for a little bit of time to talk about a very important election, and it's great to hear your voice, Egberto.
Great to hear you. Now, please let me know what because this is an election not a lot of people know about. We don't hear it advertised a whole lot, but it's a very, very important election. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
That's right. So the May 4th election is a uniform election that typically takes place in non or even years. In this case, there is a special election and a countywide election for Harris County. For those who live in Senate District 15, our now Mayor, John Whitmire, was the former senator for, I believe, somewhere 30 plus to 40 years. And now that he's the mayor, it leaves the seat vacant. So there are two candidates vying to fill the vacancy of John Whitmire's old seat in Senate District 15. That is Jarvis Johnson and Molly Cook. May 4th is Election Day. We have 2 days of early voting left. So today, April 29th, and tomorrow, April 30th, voters can vote from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. at 25 different early voting locations. Yes, 25 different early voting locations are where voters can vote. And also there is a countywide election. So no matter where you are in the city of Houston, if you're not in Senate District 15, which about 21% of voters are, the entire county has the Harris County Central Appraisal District election to cast their ballot in. And that is for this is the first time this election has ever happened across the state of Texas. There are appraisal district elections happening. There are 3 board members in which Harris County voters will decide who will represent them on the Harris County Appraisal District Board. That's 3 different positions, 3 board members. And again, this is all happening May 4th. Harris County is conducting elections for HCAD and SD15 only, but there are some jurisdictions who are doing small city, mayoral, and school elections. So 2 more days to early vote. I always encourage early voting as I am headed on a full day. The weather is a little doom and gloom. It's a lot of rain. And, you never know what you're going to get before you get to Election Day, May 4th. But if you vote on Election Day, May 4th, which is a Saturday for this election, you will have 151 vote centers to select any one of those to vote anywhere on Election Day. So we encourage voters to go to harrisvotes.com, pull your sample ballot. If you're in Harris County, you'll have HCAD. If you're in SD15, you'll have that race. Look and find your closest vote center. You can go on Harris Votes and get a copy of your sample ballot and take that sample ballot into the poll with you.
Ms. Hudspeth, do you have 2 minutes? I have 2 specific questions if you have the time.
I have a little time. Yes, let's do it.
Okay, great. First question is this. Why is it that after we had people vote for, a large election, that we went ahead and have this small election when we could have done all of this at one time, one place, and not have our citizenry having to do this again? Could you explain? I mean, first of all, I know you don't have control over that. Can you explain why?
Yes, that's a very good question, because most logical people will ask, why are we going twice to vote in the month of May? This year, which is a presidential year and even year, we had primary elections. Texas election code states that primary elections can only be primary elections. There cannot be any other entities to join a primary election, and that is the same for a primary runoff. So it would have to be a legislative change and a change to the election code that would allow other entities, and when I say other entities, other contests, other race, other jurisdictions, to be able to allow for other races to be on that ballot. And so in this case, SD15 special election, which is different from the Senate district election that will replace the long-term seat of former Mayor John Whitmire. Well, I'm sorry, current Mayor, former Senator John Whitmire. So just a little bit of education on this piece is Saturday, individuals for Senate District 15 will fill the vacancy immediately because right now SD 15 doesn't have representation. That person will fill the vacancy between immediately following May 4th until December 31st of 2024. On May 28th, voters will again vote in that same Senate district race for either Jarvis Johnson or Molly Cook to fill the long-term seat, which means their term will start January of 2025, like everyone else who goes through the November ballot, through a 2-year term. So I know it's very confusing. Some people call it two-step, vote twice in the month of May. For HCAT, it's just that one day. It is a special election. That is when the governor and the state of Texas has deemed this election will take place. And there is typically always uniform elections May 4th. But the reason why they can't be combined is because it has to be a legislative change. Primary elections are set only to have that race indicated in even years. So I hope that provides a little bit of clarity as we move along and better understand elections. So I know voters might have a little bit voter fatigue, but we encourage you to go vote twice. Early voting again ends tomorrow for May 4th. May 4th is election day. And then shortly after, we have primary runoff where early voting is the end of May and election day is May 28th.
Given that you serve the entire county, irrespective of party, I won't mention this, but I have another answer that I want to add to what you said, why we have these sort of ridiculous elections. But I want to give you a commendation of the great work that you have done in marshaling these elections, even with the complexities that you had to follow from the state, some of them that made absolutely no sense. Specifically, also like to give you the kudos for making sure things ran efficiently by combining, doing some combination of the electoral in the electoral machines, etc., at all these different polling stations. That was great, ingenious work, which you saved the county quite a few dollars. Very good work on your part. Now, please let us.
You. I have an incredible team who works around the clock to make sure elections are efficient and run very well.
And in as much as the state is running our elections in an inefficient manner, we have a Harris County clerk who has made lemonade out of lemons. Now, let's ask about HCAD. Let's ask about HCAD now. Tell the people the importance of this race. I have some political statements I want to make after you leave, but tell them specifically why HCAD is important.
Yes. As I mentioned earlier, in the last legislative session, lawmakers decided or passed a law that the appraisal districts across our state of Texas would have elections for the very first time. In the past, any board members of the appraisal district were all appointed members. Some of those include our tax assessor collector, who's an elected official. But the appraisal district is very important for many reasons. When you get that mailer in the mail from the tax office or the appraisal district, they set the tax rate for our property. You own property, you plan to own property, you live in Harris County. This election is extremely important. And oftentimes, when we have elections of this nature, especially on a Saturday, those elections can go overlooked, right? And can go misunderstood. And so that's part of the reason why I'm on here today. I'm so glad you all are having me here to express the importance of this. Now, while these 3 board members that will be elected will not set tax rates in particular, their work will be very important. They will approve and help to set budgets. That's important. If you're a taxpayer here in Harris County, they will do very important work, and their terms will begin. Their terms will begin immediately, July of this year through 2026. And so, again, first time ever election. There are 3 different board members that voters will select to represent them on the Harris County Appraisal District, and there are quite a few individuals vying for those races. I encourage all voters, if you want to know a little bit more about these individuals that are running, because the Harris votes will only show you a sample ballot. I encourage voters to go to League of Women Voters Houston or Google lwvhouston.org. The League of Women Voters produces a voter guide, and I believe majority of those candidates have provided a statement or their background for voters to do a little research or homework before they go cast their ballot in this election. Again, the League of Women Voters is a good nonpartisan resource that can allow voters to take a look at who is on the ballot, what their platforms are, and why they should be selected for the office. So we can go. I'm glad that you're going to touch the political point, Egberto. You're right. I can't do that. But it is really important to know that local elections like this meet you at your doorstep. I know president, U.S. senator, those races are the races that get a lot of attention. But it is so important that we pay attention to our local races, school board, HCAD, Senate districts, because those are the individuals you will likely call for a service or call to understand how they're better serving you.
Ms. Hudspeth, last question that I always ask, what would you have liked me to ask you that I didn't?
Yes. Well, I would say the only and final last thing is to make sure that you go to harrisvotes.com if you are in Harris County. I don't know that you asked me that, but I always like to encourage folks to go there, look at your sample ballot, and find the vote center closest to you. Again, today and tomorrow is the last days of early voting from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. 25 locations. May 4th is Election Day, 151 vote centers to choose from. Make a plan to vote, not just on May 4th, but May 28th as well. And we look forward to seeing you at the polls. Elections like this tend to have low voter turnout. And one thing I know for sure is when you miss your opportunity to cast the ballot, you're allowing others to make the decision for you. So harrisvotes.com. I'm Teneshia Hudspeth. I appreciate this opportunity to share this morning, and we'll see you at the polls.
Ms. Teneshia Hudspeth, Harris County Clerk, thank you so kindly for having been on UTalk. Steve Hunter's UTalk. Thank you so kindly.
Thank you.
All right, folks. That was our Harris County Clerk. She has revolutionized that office. She has done a lot of good work in that office. She has, like I mentioned before, turned lemons into lemonade. We have a state that uses we have a state governed by a sect who use all kinds of tactics to get their way, to reduce voter turnout, etc., so that they can control your lives. They can make sure that only the few gets the necessary services from the state, and I'll explain. Anyway, folks, remember this is Steve Hunter's UTalk, and he'll be back mañana. He will be back tomorrow to do his job. I'll try my best to fill his big shoes. Anyway, folks, the telephone number is 713-526-5738. Please feel free to call at will to discuss whatever topic of your choice. But as you know, we started with this discussion on the local Harris County Appraisal District race, which is occurring right now, early vote, which is on Saturday, May 4th, I believe, for the actual vote. And it is important to understand what's being done here by your government. Think about this. We just got a tax break, folks. The last session in Congress, did you see what happened to your property tax rate? It went down a little bit. If you had a big house, the bigger your house, the more you saved. The bigger the house, the more you saved. So it looked like a tax cut. It was a great thing. But for most of the average Texan, they save a little bit of money. But what it cost the Texans for that little bit of property tax saving was a lot to our school districts, a lot to these other places. But the wealthy who own the mega mansions got a humongous property tax cut. They always use the middle class and the poor and the working class to further enrich the few. I'm going to tell a little story. And I don't remember which amendment, constitutional amendment it was. But all of us Texans had the opportunity to get back some of, or rather, the opportunity to vote people into office who could take back some of the monies that were taken from all of us by a select few. You know, there are folks who have built their wealth on the free money given by our state, whether it is those who got free monies to build toll roads, whether those who are pulling out the oil out of our grounds, the minerals out of our public lands that they get to use free of charge, right? So there is this thing called tax, a small tax on wealth that we could debate, we could talk about. There's a lot we could do to figure out how best to give the services needed by our state, by our country. So one of the things that would have made sense is that the wealthy don't make income because of the way we've defined income. The wealthy tries to make as little income as possible. They try to make all their wealth in different forms, whether it is stock appreciation, whether it is using insurance to borrow from so that they pay no taxes. Yeah, that's a thing, man. You have a lot of money, you buy an insurance policy and you borrow from that insurance policy, you got money tax free, baby. Most of us don't know of all these techniques used by the wealthy so that their wealth is really their income, but because it's not defined as income, it is not taxed. So an amendment came out. People are getting smart. And your government in Austin, your government in Washington, they know that people are getting smart and they're going to find out, hey, why is it that I have a home and I pay property taxes on the home? A home is an asset no different than a stock. You made an investment in your home with the expectation that it would appreciate. But you know what? Check out what's happening to some homes right now. They also can fall in value. So your car is an investment in an asset. Your home is an investment in an asset. There are a lot of things that you pay property taxes on right now. That's an asset, just like a stock is an asset. But we have done some magical things to keep the wealthy wealthy. And what do? We say, the stock, we only pay taxes on it if you sell it and it increased in value from what you sold. And then even then, we charge you a smaller interest rate, or rather a smaller tax rate than the guy who works their hands, the guy who works a factory, the guys who get an income. But even worse, while the average economy grows at, let's say, 2 to 3%, the stock market grows at 7%. This is an unsustainable formula. And you know how we know it? Because you are worth less and less in the aggregate every single year. Every single year, the wealth disparity grows. And we Texans just voted to say we are not going to allow the legislature to pass any laws that will somehow possibly tax wealth. I want you guys to think about that, folks. But most people didn't know what they were voting for, because if you read the rule, you think it applied to you and you don't really want to be taxed anymore. So what we did is we made a constitution. We supported a constitutional amendment in Texas that said we won't tax wealth. But you know what we did not say? We can still tax your property. We can still tax your home. We can still tax your car, because all of us own homes, or a lot of us own homes. A lot of us own cars. So we'll pay a property tax on that home or that car every single year. But you got stocks. As long as you hold on to those stocks, no problem, no taxes. And if you need money, just go ahead and have those stocks held by an insurance company, and that insurance company would loan you some money backed by your stock, and you pay no taxes, baby. Folks, the reason why we tolerate what we tolerate is because very few know all these concepts. Now we talk about HCAT. Our county clerk, Harris County Clerk Teneshia Hudspeth, she's doing the best she can to tell folks to vote. Why do you better vote in HCAT? Because the next thing that they're going to do is they're going to make you believe that we're going to start passing different kinds of laws with regards to property taxes. Watch them reduce property taxes. Watch them put a cap on property taxes, likely after a property reaches a certain value. Maybe we pay less. I mean, they can do as they please if they have your mind. And if you are not engaged locally in your elections, if you're not engaged to understand what's going on, then you pay like we always pay. That is why, as Teneshia said, as Ms. Hudspeth said, these elections are so important because it starts at local control and it moves up to state control. Then it moves on to federal control. And if we keep believing the crap that we hear about taxes and all these other issues, we will constantly be left at a disadvantage. The telephone number is 713-526-5738. Again, that number is 713-526-5738. This is UTalk. Steve Hunter's UTalk. Steve is indisposed today, but he'll be back tomorrow. So right now, I'm just filling in for Brother Hunter. Harry, come on in. And folks, give us a call. 713-526-5738. Come on in, Harry.
Good morning, Egberto. I hope Senior Hunter is feeling better. And I know he had been under the weather a few weeks ago. I didn't get a chance to tell him that when I talked to him, I think about a week ago. But, I hope he's feeling better. But I did get a chance to talk to him about when he went to go see the eclipse when he and Amanda got to do that. And I was glad he got to do that. And you're right, Egberto, about the taxes and stuff. Like I said earlier, when I called politics done right, you heard me when I said earlier about you got to get in people that think like you. And this, what's this local woman's name again? The clerk?
That is County Clerk Teneshia Hudspeth.
Teneshia Hudspeth. Teneshia, get that vote out. You're doing a good job. You got to get in more progressive-minded thinking people. You've got to vote out Greg Abbott in 2 years, and so that way you can get rid of that crook Ken Paxton, and you got to get in more progressive-minded people that will change these laws so that you can get your property tax down. Because Greg Abbott do nothing and isn't going to do anything about it. But what I wanted to call, because I called your show again earlier, but Jack said you had to play that video of Bernie Sanders, and you had to cover those topics. So I was going to call tomorrow and talk about it, but since you're on, I'll talk about it now. I was going to mention this last week. Those those lawyers, I call them Giuliani and the rest of those lawyers who did the election fraud, those fake electors. Well, I hope they get convicted for what they did, trying to cheat the American people out of their votes. And it's just, again, more of the cronies that Donald Trump surrounds himself with. And that's what Justice Jackson was talking about when I said earlier about criminal enterprise. And kudos to Bernie Sanders. I love that video you played earlier, Egberto, when he was talking about Netanyahu and the ethnic cleansing and the genocide that he's doing over there. I voted for Bernie in the primaries in 2016 when all that talk about feel the burn and all that. I was feeling the burn. Unfortunately, the Democrats and Barack Obama partially is responsible for this. They sabotaged Bernie. They didn't let him on all the ballots. And so because they had predicted that had he gotten the nomination, there never would have been a President Trump. He would have beaten the brakes off Trump in 2016. We would have had a President Sanders, because a lot of people just weren't feeling Hillary. And I couldn't, and I told Steve this once, I couldn't vote for Hillary back then because she called people like you and me and our young people super predators at one time. And Tom Hartman mentioned that as well. And kudos to Rashida Tlaib, who you mentioned, and Ilhan Omar. Keep pushing. Keep fighting what's happening to the Judean people over there. You just have to get that out. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, Egberto, about that woman you said that was thrown around like a rag dog. These policemen are bullies. And it's just, As the mayor of politics, done right, told you last week on his show, they're turning some of these places, like here in the University of Texas, where you went, into trying to make it a fascist state, trying to silence people's voices. And as I told Marlo Blue and Ram last Friday, it's just really sad, very sad that people can't speak their mind, and it should all be solidarity. And as Bernie was talking about with the anti-Semitism comments that he made, that he elaborated on, whether you are for Netanyahu or you're against Netanyahu, and you happen to be Jewish, you all have a voice. And if you're a student on these campuses where they've been arresting these people, they should be allowed to speak their voice.
Harry,
as you mentioned,
thank you,
about South Africa, I was going to say really quick, was you mentioned about South Africa, you said demonstrating and protesting is difficult, and it's just really a shame that people have to go get brutalized.
Thank you very much, Harry.
Okay,
Harry, you have a wonderful rest of your day, my brother. Absolutely.
Okay.
Folks, the telephone number is 713-526-5738. One more time, 713-526-5738. This is Egberto Willies substituting today for Brother Steve Hunters here at UTalk, but he'll be back mañana. He'll be back tomorrow. Anyway, folks, since I don't have any calls, I do have a video that I should have played on my show earlier today that I think is present, and I want to get it out. We've been talking a whole lot about the protest that's going on. And one of the things that I want to mention is that we are not getting the real story. And it is upsetting to watch the mainstream media fall right in line with what AIPAC wants them to say. So I want to play you a piece here. Good journalism is in short supply, but we do have good journalists. Last week, I played Mark Thompson, who actually went to the campuses so that they could see for themselves what's going on and not what is meant to be reported or how they try to spin the reporting. And here is that right now. For some time now, I've been talking about journalism. Two things about journalism. Our current form of journalism taught in school is no longer functional under the right-wing type of actions going on, not only in America, but throughout the world. When we try to keep a false balance, a false narrative, a false equivalence, which is what standard journalism sort of deals with. He said this, she said that, this person says this, X person says that, without any context. What happens is those who are willing to blatantly lie generally are the ones who modify public opinion. And the same thing is occurring with the student protest that's going on throughout the country. It is being completely misreported. It is being undermined by the movement is being undermined by good reported, in as much as it is a benevolent movement for peace. But every so often you find some reporters that are bold, that don't follow the status quo, and that's why I have a whole lot of respect for Joanne Reed. She takes a lot of flack, but she is using the platform she has on her network and privately, not to sugarcoat what's going on, but to tell it like it is, and it upsets quite a few people. But again, she calls a ball, a strike, and she brought in Antonia Hilton, who was on the ground at Columbia and other places, and she tells some truths about what the protest is all about. I brought in Mark Thompson a few days ago, who was also on campus at Columbia, to tell Americans the truth, not the fallacy about a whole lot of crazy left-wing students that are anti-Semitic and blindly supporting Palestine or Gaza. That's not the case. People understand that Hamas are terrorists, but people as well understand that Netanyahu himself is no better than these terrorists. And in fact, he has done much more harm to humanity than these. It's sad, but the numbers tell it, right? So we have to have good journalists out there. We have to have bold journalists that respect the intelligence of the American people so that they can inform appropriately, and where they must say this particular side is simply wrong. This particular side is simply lying. And as such, we can't say he said, she said, but that this one is telling the truth and this one is lying. I want you to listen to this conversation between Joy-Ann Reid and Antonia Hilton about the protest that's going on right now on several campuses around the entire country. Check this out. We'll take it on the other side.
A wave of nationwide student activism is meeting an increasingly hostile, over-the-top police presence that's starting to feel kind of like hysteria. More than 400 demonstrators have been taken into police custody in just the last 8 days, including 57 people in a particularly violent scene at the University of Texas at Austin, 108 at Emerson College in Boston, and 93 at the University of Southern California. At Columbia University, which saw the first wave of student suspensions and arrests, kicking off the nationwide movement. Student organizers are now saying that negotiations with the university have resumed after a 30-hour pause. Joining me now is NBC News correspondent Antonia Hilton, who was at Columbia University today as demonstrations entered their 8th day. Antonia, you've been doing fantastic reporting, so I just want you to say more. Tell me what you're seeing.
Well, what I'm seeing is a campus that is extremely tense right now.
And the core of this is what they're seeing in Gaza. They're seeing it on social media. They're seeing it with their own eyes. They're upset about it. But the protests have been peaceful, right? Because the demonization of these kids is that the encampment students, I didn't call them kids, are the ones doing anti-Semitic things and screaming anti-Semitic things. Are they?
Let me clear this up. So this is not a black and white, us versus them, very easy story. This is a story where when you go visit the encampments, you see significant numbers of Jewish students, visibly Jewish students, taking part in pro-Palestinian protests, holding a Seder. They are advocating for Palestinians and for divestment and a ceasefire. Right now, on the campus, there is a group of Christian nationalist associated pastors, people who are associated with organizations that believe only Christians should hold any political office in the United States, who are advocating for Israel. There are Arab Israelis that I have met who are advocating for Israel. So this is a situation where it's not very easy to figure out just who is to blame, who is on what side here. But what I can tell you is I have been going to this campus pretty much every day since last week, since all this started. And I have yet to meet a student who was engaged in the kind of anti-Semitic threats that we have seen online. That is not to say they're not existent. I have seen it. There's a guy out on Broadway right now.
Not on the campus.
Not on the campus, on Broadway, holding an incredibly anti-Semitic sign, but he's not a student. I have not been able to find a student's name and attach them to one of these incidents. And that's why I've urged reporters to be very careful, because this is not a story of Jewish versus Muslim students or black versus white students, because so often people frame it that way.
Yep.
This is a story where if you're going to go to this campus and cover it, you need to understand who you are talking to. What organizations are they associated with? And what do they really believe before you broadcast, say, 10 seconds of images or photos that you've taken? Make it very clear the context and the story that you are telling. Because when you actually talk to students, what they tell me is they are a very different generation. They are seeing images of children dying on their phones. They are horrified. There are kids who are political science majors and have studied this for years. And the kids who are getting into this just in the last few days because of what they've seen transpire around the country.
This is why I love a real journalist. Antonia Hilton, you are actually there doing the work. This is what we need journalism to do. Don't just make up stuff to bully these kids based on what you think. Go down there and report, or rely on an actual reporter. Antonia Hilton, thank you, my sister. Well done.
I hope you got that. One would have you believe that somehow these protesters are anti-Semitic. Most of these protesters are like any other protest, the protests that I participated back in the 80s at the University of Texas for the divestiture of our university from South Africa's apartheid. I mean, this is standard operating procedure in good protest movements. Luckily, Antonia Hilton told a very important truth. The people that are in those encampments are not just Arabs or Muslims. They're Jewish people that are a part of the movement. A lot of my friends that are encouraging me to do what I do. or my Jewish friends that are saying, yes, Netanyahu is putting the cause behind. He's creating the animus that we see against many Jewish brothers and sisters right now. So let's be clear. Let's be very, very clear. The misreporting must stop. We must have a ceasefire. We must build the pressure towards forcing our president to stop being a stooge of Netanyahu. I know some people may be saying that he's playing a different game behind the scenes, but what we as Americans see is Netanyahu running our countries in many ways. When we talk about unfettered access to our bombs, unfettered access to our military equipment with no strings attached that says you cannot kill in the name of the United States of America.
We spend a lot of time.
No, you cannot. You should not. We should not allow folks to kill in our name. Anyway, folks, let's go to Tag. Line numero uno. Come on in, Tag.
Morning, Egberto again.
Good morning, sir.
You know, what I haven't heard much from anybody is the profit motive behind what Israel's doing. Do you follow me here?
Oh, we've spoken about that a whole lot on Politics Done Right. There are a lot of different profit motives, and there's a lot of different profit centers, if you will. But go ahead, Tag, please.
Well, from what some people are reporting, that they've got oil underneath the West Bank and also a huge gas field, under Gaza.
Yeah, all of that is true.
But see, nobody talks about that. It's all about Hamas. It's all about Netanyahu. Nobody brings in the idea that there's a profit motive driving this whole thing. And I think that's the fact that people are not considering when they're formulating their protests. It's like, this is a war about hydrocarbons, and it's also a war against the people for profit. And so often this happens, and it really needs to stop. Those people who live in Gaza should be benefiting off that natural gas. They shouldn't be killed because of it. And I think that's really the biggest crime of all. So I think that we need to really get that message out there and make people think about that. Once again, it's back to the hydrocarbon wars. And it's another reason why they don't want electric power here, or electric cars, or electric anything, because it just takes away from the demand for hydrocarbons. So,
well, you're absolutely right. And you see, the thing about it is, as we get better in our technology, it's so cheap to get hydrocarbons. I mean, right in our backyard, we are willing to keep Venezuela in reserve. People don't understand. The reason we want Venezuela to remain in the crappy state that it is right now is that is our reserve, my brother. That's our reserve. It's the largest amount of oil on the planet right now, the largest reserve on the planet. And we are keeping it offline because it's our reserve. People don't... We'll talk about that another time, but Tag, you nailed it. There's so much that hydrocarbon runs in this world. There's so much we are behind in battery technology, solar technology, and these other technologies because of the hydrocarbon lobby. You're absolutely right. Anything else before I jump to Rick?
And yeah, real quick. If these resources were developed, in Venezuela, like you mentioned, or the gas in Gaza, the bottom would fall out of the price of these things on the market now. So the only way they can ensure that they make this big money on all this stuff is by keeping this stuff locked up and also abusing the people who hold these things. And
brother,
it's crime.
Brother, you nailed it. It's called false scarcity. All this inflation that we talk about today is all caused by false scarcity. Remember that word, folks, false scarcity. We don't have a demand problem. We don't have a supply problem. We have a false scarcity problem. A false scarcity, and they're inflicting that on you. And by the way, Tag, we are complicit in this based on how we vote. If we want to stop the false scarcity, if we want to stop the inflation, if we want to stop all these things, we vote the right people in. Right now, we're voting neoliberals into Congress, into the House, and I'm talking both Democrats and Republicans alike. Thank you, Tag. You have a wonderful rest of your day.
Egberto, one more quick thing is that a lot of this is contingent on our spending habits.
Yes.
If we subject ourselves to these high prices, they'll just drive them higher. So when gas prices go up, we need to stop buying gasoline.
I agree 100%. I agree 100%. We have more power than we understand, and we saw that during the pandemic. Thank you, Tag. Let's go to Rick. Come on in, Rick. Rick, you're on.
Yeah, all right. I had to go switch off Bluetooth here. I was going to talk about the campus protest, but I guess I'll have to shelve that. That can be another day because you raised a very interesting topic on energy. But you need to clear some misconceptions here. The Venezuelan oil isn't being held in reserve. The problem with Venezuelan oil is that it's on paper, they have more reserves than Saudi Arabia, but in practical terms, those reserves are basically, they're worse than tar sands.
There's sulfur. Yeah, they have let me just.
It's heavy, sour crude, and it requires vast amounts of energy to extract it. It's kind of a very thick, gooey, tarry mess, and you need a lot of natural gas to force that out of the ground. It's going to be very expensive, high in sulfur, which means the refineries have to be retooled to remove sulfur, and that can be done. There is a refinery that I'm aware of in Louisiana that can handle it.
Yeah, let me just interrupt you a second because
we don't do it in mass. We don't do it in volume because the volume of the oil that we extract is from the West Texas Permian and the not the Athabasca, that's Canada's tar sands. The up in North Dakota, and it's very sweet, very light crude. It's got a very high API rating. That's American Petroleum Institute rating. A sweet spot is between 28 and 32 API. The stuff in Venezuela is probably around a 9 or a 10. It's very gooey stuff.
I don't want to dispute what you're saying, Rick. I don't want to dispute what you're saying, but I remain with the statement that I said initially about Venezuela being our reserve. You are correct that Venezuela, in Maracaibo and these other places have some bad oil, but there are also large reserves of good oil in Venezuela. Its totality is huge.
Yeah, in the Orinoco Basin. That's what I was talking about.
Exactly.
Basin, that's what gives them that high reserve rating.
Right. But what I'm saying is they have a composite of good oil and bad oil. And you are correct that what makes it the largest reserve is when you look at the totality. But there's a lot of good immediately available oil that Venezuela was exporting for a long time until we got the political angst. In other words, we will not allow.
Well, yeah, but until it peaked, okay, because Venezuela's production peaked, I don't know when, decades ago, and they're in decline just like a lot of others. The big granddaddy, of course, is in Saudi Arabia. When they decline, then we're in terminal decline. But that I don't think is what's going to kill oil consumption. But I also wanted to address electric cars, too, if I may.
Go ahead. Please do.
Okay. I've been driving an electric car for about 7.5 years. And the idea was that electric cars would be, we would be transitioning to electric cars. At first, it was, people should have a choice, electric cars or gas. It's morphed into now, this is going to be the future. The fact of the matter is that when Ford, GM, and Stellantis made this big push towards EVs, they picked the most expensive, largest vehicles to market as EVs, and they took a bath. Ford is selling about 130,000 loss on every EV that they sell. I think it's a Ford F-150 EV. General Motors as well. They basically overshot. They let 20 years of, they'd actually led in electric vehicle technology 20 years ago. They let that slip. Along comes Tesla. And now the Chinese are really way ahead of, no, they're not way ahead of us, but they have
they're mass producing. They know what they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, but they're also losing money too. That's the thing. There is a way to make money. Maybe Tesla is going to be revamping the entire manufacturing process. The assembly line is going to go away. And they're just going to break it into 4 separate assemblies and then just put the whole thing together, and it should drop the cost to assemble by 50%. If they can pull that off, then they'll be in the driver's seat. But the problem is right now, nobody, and certainly not American car manufacturers, can produce an affordable electric car for the masses. And until that happens, this is just a pipe dream. Now, look, I drive an electric car. I'm a big fan of them.
Wait, let me just. I want to interrupt you a second. I get all your points. Okay, let me just push back very hard on both the electrical and on the oil. Most of the problems that we currently have is because of the oil industry not allowing the burgeoning of the technology. I don't have to dispute anything. Let me get this. I don't have to dispute anything that you. Let me finish, Rick. I don't have to dispute anything that you have said because all that you've said has been very accurate. But it's only accurate because of the ineptitude of the executives that we have, that we sort of revere. They simply don't know what they're doing. Okay, so therefore, we should be well ahead. If we had the right leadership, if we had the right policies, and the reason we don't have that is the ineptitude, the greed, and the selfishness of those not only in the petroleum industry, but a impotent political class, etc. But Rick, I really appreciate what you had to say. And by the way, keep real quick.
Yeah, very briefly. Okay, the problem with American car manufacturers is they do not know how to make an economy car, and they haven't since the Japanese cleaned their clocks out in the 1970s. Until they can figure that out, the big three are going to fade into the dustbin of history.
Let me say what. Let me give a corollary to that, brother, and it goes like this: Americans can do and make anything. We have the intellect. We have the universities, we have the schools to do it. The problem is that it's not the engineer, it's not the physicist, it's not the technologists that are making these decisions. It is leadership that says, wait a minute, if I make a small car, I can make 100,000 cars and only make a little bit on each car and make a profit for the company. But you know where there's growth? If I can have a big item that has a huge profit margin, hey, why would I bother with those little things? And that is a mentality that we have. Thank you so kindly, Rick, for calling in, my brother. All right, let's go to Bobby. Come on in, Bobby, line number 5. Bobby, talk to me.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing fine.
I had a question good. Before 9/11, we're talking about taxes. And when I think about taxes, and of course, like you, I feel like the very most wealthy people get away with a lot. Mm-hmm. But I remember before 9/11, there was a lot of talk about, let's say, the Department of Defense would be given a budget, and then they would also be given, a black budget for their sensitive projects. But for some reason, they kept having $10 to $20 trillion of their other money just supposedly evaporate to the point where they have full-time employees, putting down that they paid $500 a frying pan for 10,000 frying pan, just trying to balance their books. Well, how do we keep that? I don't ever hear anybody talking about why we let them, misuse tax funds and just completely disappear into programs that have no checks and balances that nobody's ever asking about. It's almost like there's a hand that's controlling the hand, and the real power. It's almost like they have us arguing with each other, like over little issues, when in fact, the people in real power, we don't even probably know their names. They're in bureaucracies. They're not voted in. They probably have lifetime membership, or they're in the military and have, there's all this things that are going that they're completely unchecked. And I just wanted to know, let me, Bobby, let me interrupt you and tell you, first of all, the one thing I want to ask you is, you were about to fall a little bit into this state that some of these guys on the right talk about, like if there's some magical state that people aren't voting against. None of that is true. Every elected official has the ability to shape policy. We as a people, we as voters, we have to take responsibility and vote the right people in. We have to take the responsibility of not being gullible.
In other words, you brought up a great point with that, the black ops, or rather the black budget, right? That is a budget that the defense industrial complex actually runs in Congress. It's part of our defense budget that you don't know what's in it. You just know it's several billions in there, and they can't tell you what it is because it is secret, right? We shouldn't allow that. Period. Punto y final.
How come there's not an elected official that can tell us where the $10 to $20 trillion were? They were doing an investigation within the Pentagon, basically on themselves.
Because again,
and it got hit by something during 9/11.
Brother, it's our fault. If we want that changed,
I agree, but I'm saying, how do we rein back control from those that
I'm about to tell you, it is. Believe it or not, it isn't all that complicated. What happened is we have too many Americans that are gullible into voting into. All you have to say is, "I am for defense," and somehow Americans feel like, well, we need to be protected so badly that we have such a large defense budget that it is that the next 10 countries' budgets is less than our one budget. The 10 countries' defense budget is less than what we as Americans spend on defense. Somebody's getting that money. But you hear, I can name you a lot of progressives right now tackling that issue and saying, elect us because we won't allow this. And you know what happens then? You get all the defense industrial complex lobbyists advertising on TV and fooling people. You get them convincing the gullibility of many of our citizens who then go ahead and vote against your own interests. One of the things we do with the programs that we have here is to try to tell folks, vote your interests. And these are the things that we're talking about. So you've made a great observation, my brother. And the solution is easy, and that is real quick. I got to go to Anonymous real quick.
Okay, so the people that were elected at that time probably do have the information, and it's our fault for electing them. Then that's all we don't know today.
Yes.
What happened to all those funds?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, brother. Got to go. Thanks, brother. Let's go to Anonymous. Anonymous, you got 1 minute. Anonymous, are you there? Okay, I'm going to try one more time. Anonymous, are you there? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. All right. Well, I guess you're not there. Anyway, folks. So look, what Bobby had to say is so true. And my response to that is we have to take responsibility. We have to stop being gullible. We have to stop people from having us talk about racism, anti-Semitic, and you hating this one and you hating that one. For those who listen to the other program that I do, you hear me talk about I hate no one. I love my MAGA brothers. I love my progressive brothers. I'm telling brothers and sisters. I love all the folks because I am not going to fall into the trap that the plutocracy would have us fall into. They want us fighting against each other so that we don't see what they're doing to us all. And we got to get away from that. Anyway, let me throw it to the studio. My brother's in the studio. Talk to me.
I don't know. No guard there. I don't know. It's just it gets to be too much sometimes. It's the secret man in the secret room making the deals, and then everybody else has to suffer with it.
Well, we are going to take care of that anyway, folks. This has been UTalk, Steve Hunter's show here on KPFT. I am here just for that one little hour till he make his grand return tomorrow, mañana. So, what do I tell you? UTalk is out.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number 1, subscribe to our channel. And number 2, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.